have changed. So everyone has a smartphone, right, in their pocket. We have calculators right on our person, which would have been handy back when we were trying to divide the score out of 60, which is what the original Alberta assessment was. It was like, what's 43 out of 60 again? It's hard to kind of remember that. So tools and technology have changed. Cameras have gotten better. GPS mapping has gotten a lot better. We all used to kind of look at ortho maps with those funny little glasses, and now you can basically pull up Google Maps of any site you want to see. But still, some things have changed or have stayed the same. So we're still focusing questions on those 5 key indicators. So questions 1, 2, and 3 will focus on vegetation. What are the plants telling us on that site? Questions 4 and 5 will address hydrology and litter. And we're still, again, comparing everything that we're seeing on that site to the reference plant community. So what sort of bare soil are we seeing relative to what we should expect to see for that site? We're also really attached to fitting a complex, beautiful landscape with lots of nuances and subtleties into a simple 2-page score sheet. So we're still stuck on that. So we're gonna add checkboxes and formulas to make sure that we stick our answers all within that 2 pages. And we want to make sure that we serve a broad audience of users. So other things that have not changed, the score point allocation, it's still out of 100 points. So in 2008, you can see the breakdown of points for questions 1, 2, 3, and 4, or 3, 4, and 5, and the same for the 2025 version. So those have not changed. Other things that have changed, however, is including an assessment type decision tree. So like we mentioned earlier, rangeland is very diverse. There might be some pockets of tame pasture in there. There might be some wetlands. There might be some forested areas. So when you visit a site, what assessment do you do? Do you do a forested assessment? How do you assess the tame pasture? Which, riparian assessment do you possibly do? So we're going to add a decision tree into that. A big change from Saskatchewan is we used to look at the plants that were out there, look at the native plant species composition, but we'd estimate the above ground biomass. So we used to estimate the production of each species we'd see. So say we're looking at a frame, we see some needle and thread grass, we see some western wheatgrass, we see some June grass. We'd actually estimate the above ground production. Now we're going to estimate the foliar cover. So that was a bit of a shift from 2008's version to 2025. How agronomic invasive species are addressed is changing as well. So on my farm, some parts of my farm, I love having Seister milk veg. I've had meal drop some off at my farm before. On other parts of my farm that's native prairie, I don't want to see Seister milk veg. So how do we deal with those agronomic tame species? We want to retain the biodiversity of our rangeland. We want to retain those benefits, those habitat attributes that make prairie really unique and really special. But we do need to account for when you have a crested wheatgrass plant in the middle of the native prairie. How the 2008 version needs to account for it was it actually, crested wheatgrass was viewed as negatively as leafy spurge. So now, in 2025, we're actually adding an extra component to the question to kind of break down what invasives are we seeing. To me, leafy spurge is way worse than crested wheatgrass on the landscape because you're still performing some functions with crested wheatgrass out there that you certainly won't be performing with leafy spurge. We're also adding a component about woody encroachment. So without the absence of management, fire, or grazing, you will see an increase in woody encroachment, and there's certainly been some really good, exciting up-and-coming projects dealing with woody encroachment on rangeland. So now we've actually included a question component addressing that as well. We're also including information on biocrust. So in my part of the world, in the Southwest, there's not a lot growing or not a lot of different structural diversity. So actually the biocrust is a really important layer on our pastures. That's like the living lichen moss layer that will cover the soil surface. So instead of bare ground, you're actually having some of that living component biocrust layer there. It's also important in other areas too, where you're looking at forested areas and things like that. Then litter. So got here my handy dandy litter kits. We're still going to be talking a lot about litter. Litter is really important for a lot of different functions, whether it's breaking down into nutrients, whether it's insulating the soil surface, whether it's improving water infiltration. Litter is super important. Now we're actually realizing though that there is such a thing, maybe not in my neck of the woods, but there is such a thing as too much litter. So what do when you have too thick of a batch of litter? You're actually selecting for plants that can naturally withstand growing in those conditions, in those lower light conditions. You're actually changing the plant community when there's so much thick litter. You're also delaying the soil warm-ups for springtime in some of those cases as well. So now our litter question is actually addressing some of those considerations that it didn't in the past. So I say we're talking about 5 indicators, but we're kind of cheating a little bit. So the 2008 version was 5 indicators, but really asking questions in 7 different questions. So the earlier version had 57% of the questions observing specifically the plant community, and 43% of those questions referred specifically to the hydrology and site stability. So that would be soil questions or litter questions, so 7 questions in total. And now in 2025, we're kind of cheating a little bit more. So now we're actually still looking at 5 indicators, but actually in 9 questions. So now 2/3 of the questions are pertaining to the plant community, and 33% of the questions are pertaining to hydrology and site stability. So we've also added a few check boxes. I know when you're in the field, you're not going to maybe take a lot of notes sometimes, but you will definitely check off the box, whether there's excess litter, whether you're seeing biocrest on the site, whether something's abundant or absent, that sort of thing. So other things that have changed, words really matter. So I'll use the litter question as an example again. The question used to be referred to as a uniform distribution of litter. Now we're realizing that you actually want to have some heterogeneity on the landscape. There's some species at risk, some grassland species, some site-specific variances that are actually a good thing up there. So you don't necessarily want to have the exact same amount of litter on the entire site. You want to have some spots of lower litter, some spots of higher litter. Generally, you want to have a certain amount of litter out there, but it's not going to be all uniform, and we shouldn't expect it to be. Also, words like healthy with problems or unhealthy. So imagine sitting down with a producer or being a producer and hearing, hey, we performed a range health assessment and your site came up as unhealthy. Oh, that's kind of hard to have a conversation when that's how you start with. So we're actually changing the wording from healthy with problems to healthy with challenges. So hopefully opening some of those doors to have some management conversations. It's still pointing to the same metrics on the form, but it's maybe starting from a point of positivity or potential, and we're changing from unhealthy to needs improvement. So again, nobody wants to hear that their site was unhealthy. So anything scoring 0 to 50 would be considered unhealthy. So now we're going to be calling that needs improvement. Anything scoring from 50 to 75 will be healthy with challenges, and then anything above 75 will be healthy. So healthy hasn't changed. That's staying the same. We're also looking at percent similarity or similarity index, and that's coming right out of a formula from these ecosite guides. So we have the formulas in the guides. We're just incorporating that now right into the score sheet. And we're also including some information on decreaser and increaser species. So I think most of the people in this room kind of have an idea of what increasers and decreasers are. I keep talking about reference plant communities and answering the questions based on the reference plant community. But the reality is there's a lot of range sites, a lot of diversity. We don't know what the reference plant community is for a lot of these sites, so we need to build in a way to kind of answer the questions without knowing the specifics if you haven't been doing range health for 20 years or 10 years or 5 years. So now we are asking people to look at the site of the plants that are out there. Are they mostly increaser species? Are they mostly decreaser species? Answering that will help guide users through the rest of the questions as well. And we're also adding in a section on glossary terms. So terms for one thing that we confuse ourselves with that sometimes. So we're actually including a glossary of terms in the back as well. And some challenges are going to stay the same. So I mentioned about reference plant community and not have a reference plant community for every single example out in the field when you're out there doing the assessment. That's still tricky. No matter what form, book, reference we have, range management remains an art and a science. You can't cram Mother Nature into a box or a 2-page form, even though we're trying. But it is one tool that can be used to help guide your observations and help guide you to be aware of different indicators that might need improvement or might not be functioning at their capacity. And again, another user that might use this. It's pretty hard to do that. So this tool might be a standalone tool for some users. It might be a part of a larger range inventory or more of a robust data collection that some organizations are doing, for example. And then what's next? The drafts. And then what's next? So we tested last summer. We've had feedback from our group of our committee, and each committee quite often solicits feedback from a larger organization or larger base, and then kind of brings it back via their representative on the committee. So we've got the feedback on the first draft. We're developing some new graphics that weren't available or I guess relevant back in 2008. We plan to publish and release 2025 just in time for the field season. So there'll be an awareness campaign, and I imagine Samfc Up will be involved in rolling out more information as well. So does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
So the tool, is it going to be like that people use or both?
Right, that's a really good question. So this is the booklet that we had started with. So we plan on publishing a booklet, and it will be available on PDF as well. And the score sheet is simply going to be 11, or some agencies and organizations develop like a Google form that they can take their adapt. But it's simply just a 2-pager. I thought about putting up the questions so you guys could actually take a look at them, but I also kind of thought we should give the rest of the group a chance to provide their feedback before we just kind of release it to the world. But yeah, it's going to come with a booklet to kind of help you guide you through the answering those questions.
It's like when you look at like decreasers, for example, you know, there's more than one decreaser, so a number of them, and identifying them can sometimes be challenging, I think. So if you're not seasoned at doing that or having someone there to lead you through it, it can be a bit of a problem.
For sure, yeah. So I suspect there'll be a lot of range health training when the new tool comes out, similar to when the original tool came out in 2008. Certainly plant identification is a huge part of it. A lot of the questions pertain to figuring out what species we're even looking at. So that is a big part of it. Within the new guidebook, we actually have a long list of online resources that will help you figure out what ecosite you might be dealing with. So an actual step-by-step guide on how to select your site through Sask SIS or Happy Sask, as well as other tools, plant ID, booklet, things like that can help support users in this adventure.
Sorry,
It's good.
but like you talked about Tane forages as well being inclusive in this quick assessment. Is that part of that as well?